to propose regulations to ban all devices that turn legal weapons into machine guns.
And I will keep doing everything that's based in science and fact and public safety effort.
Gun violence in this country is an epidemic, and it's an international embarrassment.
I'm not safe. And what are you going to do about it? I'm terrified in my own neighborhood.
For God's sake, America already has more guns than people. How many guns do we need until everybody is safe?
The governor of New Mexico is acting tyrannically once more. She's introduced a number of arm control bills that she's now attempting to pass, including a statewide ban on so-called attack weapons, a 14-day waiting period before purchasing an arm industry liability bill, and more. Call for arm action. A semi-auto arm intended for military usage and rapid effective slaying is referred to as an attack weapon. Because of its high muzzle velocity, quick rate of fire, and large capacity mags that attach to the weapon so you may fire hundreds of rounds without having to reload, attack rifles are exceptionally lethal.
Living in Albuquerque and Bernalillo County, I believe that you're safer for the next 30 days.
If you were serious, you would acknowledge that 96% of mass public shootings happen in an area where guns are banned.
I think you need to have weapons to take on the government. You need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons.
Any mag or drum that can contain more than 10 or 15 rounds of ammunition is said to have a large capacity. Large capacity mags and attack rifles with military-style designs are only meant to cause the greatest amount of damage. Regular Americans have no need for them. When attack weapons or mags with a big capacity are used in slings, there are 155% more shots fired and 47% more fatalities. Congress passed the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, also referred to as the Crime Bill, which included a nationwide ban on attack weapons. Former Presidents Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, and Gerald Ford all favored outlawing attack weapons. The Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act listed other semi-auto arms with 2 or more of the previously mentioned features, in addition to the 19 arms and their replicas. President Bill Clinton signed the bill into law. September 13, 2004 marked the expiration of the federal attack weapon ban. It was not renewed by Congress. Upon its expiration, attack weapons and mags with a large capacity became lawful unless they were prohibited by state or municipal regulations. Data confirms that banning attack weapons is effective, as we know.
Change a law, they are already used to breaking the law, and the people will still do it, will continue to do it.
Not really. Look, if you want the community to be safer, show me that you can do that.
In the 10 years following the ban's expiration from 2004 to 2014. That represents an astounding 239% increase in fatalities and a 183% increase in slayings. Attack weapons are currently prohibited in 10 states: Washington State, Illinois, Delaware, California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York, as well as Washington, D.C. 2 other states control certain aspects of possessing or acquiring them. Although these laws vary slightly from one another, they all aim to keep these weapons of mass destruction out of the hands of ordinary people. Furthermore, attack weapon rules differ slightly from those governing large capacity mags, which are prohibited in 11 states and the District of Columbia. Anything more than 10 rounds is deemed high or large capacity by the National Law Enforcement Partnership, which supports preventing civilian access to and use of these weapons. Although the Supreme Court's ruling in Heller v. District of Columbia acknowledged law-abiding residents' right to keep an arm in the house for self-defense, state attack weapons and large-capacity mag bans have mostly been supported by courts as constitutional. Large-capacity mags and attack arms are significantly more lethal in mass slings, and in recent years, the number of victims and fatalities from these types of incidents has increased.
We can't sit here and have debates. We can't wait for the 30-day session in January
to exercise our own decisions about what type of firearm they legally purchase and own.
Just the firearm issue. The public health order will evolve and has.
An average of 7 individuals were shot during each mass slaying between 2009 and 2013. This average rose by 15% over the next 5 years. Large capacity mags combined with attack rifles are frequently the weapon of choice for public mass shooters. With the use of an attack rifle, the gunman at Parkland, Florida's Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, murdered 17 people. However, there have been several horrifying slayings using these weapons before this one. An examination of mass slayings that occurred between 2009 and 2018 reveals that 6 times as many individuals were slayed in incidents involving attack weapons as in those that did not. Similarly, 5 times as many individuals were shot in mass slayings, including large capacity mags, 59% of the time, as in slayings with no such mags. Additionally, these weapons reduce the safety of our law enforcement personnel. In 2014, attack weapons claimed the lives of 1 in 5 cops slain while performing their duties. Following the federal attack weapon ban's expiration, more than 1/3 of law enforcement agencies surveyed stated that they had seen a discernible rise in the usage of attack weapons by criminals. Attack weapon bans have shown to reduce arms slayings by 37% and the proportion of attack weapons linked to armed crimes by 70% while they were in place, demonstrating the potential life-saving benefits of regulation. Since militarized individuals and criminals with easy access to attack weapons and large capacity mags are essentially outgunning the agencies tasked with protecting the public, law enforcement organizations have long backed laws that outlaw attack weapons. The attack weapon ban of 2019 was introduced in January by Representative David Cicilline, DRI-1, and Senator Dianne Feinstein, DCA. This proposal, which could save lives, would specifically prohibit the sale, production, transfer, and importation of 205 attack weapons designed in the military manner. It would also make illegal any attack weapon that had 1 or more military features and is capable of accepting a detachable mag. However, because of Senator Mitch McConnell's leadership, Congress was unable to have a vote on this crucial measure. The attack weapons ban was passed in the House of Representatives but was not put to a vote in the Senate when the proposal was reintroduced in 2021.
Our Second Amendment. It's a hell no to government trampling on our freedoms.
That suspension does not apply to any private property.
For God's sake, America already has more guns than people. How many guns do we need until everybody is safe?
We are now urging the U.S. Senate to enact S-25, the attack weapons ban of 2023, a bill that was reintroduced by Senator Dianne Feinstein, DCA, that would outlaw attack weapons and mags with a high capacity. This is the 118th Congress. The proposed 2023 attack weapon prohibition is comparable to the 1994 attack weapon ban. However, it differs significantly in that it only calls for 1 extra feature as opposed to 2. It also outlaws bump stocks and other devices that let semi-auto arms fire at a pace to fully automatic weapons, as well as any large capacity mag that can hold more than 10 rounds of ammunition. Lawfully owned arms and mags with a big capacity on the DAVE legislation shall be grandfathered in and excluded from the prohibition. Fate of attack weapons. In the wake of the devastating Highland Park, Illinois, July 4th mass slaying, the city of Naperville, Illinois, took an important step to protect the safety of their community by banning the commercial sale of attack weapons. Now, that ban is being challenged by one of the arm industry's leading advocates, the National Association for Gun Rights, NAGR. We refuse to let the arm industry put profits over public safety. That's why Brady's legal team is representing the city of Naperville. NAGR is also suing the state of Illinois for its new attack weapons ban, which Brady helped pass in 2023. Since the 2022 Supreme Court decision in Nisper v. Bruin, the NAGR has filed 7 lawsuits challenging attack weapon and large capacity mag bans. If they're successful, attack weapon and large capacity mag bans across the country could be rolled back at a time when the nation is experiencing record levels of mass slayings. States and cities should have the right to stop these weapons of war from decimating our communities. We don't have to live in fear of the arm industry, and we stand with Illinois and Naperville in their fight. Brady President Chris Brown. While the lawsuit unfolds, the ban on attack weapon remains in place in both Naperville and the state of Illinois. This is despite the arm industry's request for an injunction to stop the laws from taking effect until the court decides their constitutionality.
The Second Amendment, from the day it was passed, limited the type of people who could own a gun and what type of weapon you could own.
This problem is real, and I'm grateful to be part of the solution, and I'm grateful for our governor's work in bringing together.
Well, Mr. Wilcox, there's no law. Congress didn't pass it. That's a rule from ATF.
The NAGR first requested an injunction from the District Court and the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. Brady opposed, and the requests were denied. They then filed the injunction request on the Supreme Court's shadow docket, which means the case is reviewed without full briefing or hearing. Fortunately, on May 17, 2023, the Supreme Court refused the NAGR's request, allowing the life-saving law to remain in effect. This was an important victory, but the fight is far from over. The ban will still need to survive review in the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. Oral judgment is scheduled for June 29, 2023. NAGR versus City of Naperville. The NAGR argues that the Second Amendment renders restrictions on attack weapons and high-capacity mags unlawful, and that these restrictions conflict with the rulings made by the Supreme Court in the cases of District of Columbia versus Heller and Nisper versus Bruin. The lawsuit claims that the Second Amendment's textual protections for persons are prohibited by both the Illinois statute and the Naperville Ordinance, and that these measures are incompatible with the long-standing American custom of regulating arms. The complaint also makes the case that law-abiding people frequently own attack arms for legitimate uses. The arm lobby has been riskily attempting to change how courts understand the Second Amendment for many years. They've definitely made us all less safe in the process. Compared to the arms that were in circulation when the Second Amendment was drafted, attack weapons are essentially different and far more fatal. In fact, 155% more persons are shot in slings involving attack weapons. The NAGR also argues in their complaint that although mass slings are not uncommon, they are rare and a phenomenon with only 27 fatalities annually. In 2023, there have been more than 200 mass slings in the United States, which have claimed 200 lives. Over 40,000 people are slain, and over 100,000 people are injured nationwide as a result of armed crime each year.
Under the new rule, these firearm owners will be required to obtain special registration, surrender or destroy their brace.
Metro Detention Center. We know that that is the largest mental health facility drug treatment center in the state of New Mexico.
That's what gun control is all about. The ultimate goal is an unarmed and subjugated America.
The armed lobby cannot dupe our country into believing that having easy access to weapons of mass destruction is a solution rather than a contributing factor to the issue. Despite the Bruin case, courts have maintained the constitutionality of attack weapon bans. Additionally, the Supreme Court in Heller upholds the reasonable arm control measures, stating that the Second Amendment's guaranteed rights are not unlimited and do not grant the right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purpose. Reversing the prohibition on attack weapons, which has been shown to save lives, will only exacerbate the armed crime crisis in America and result in more tragedies. This case is an example of the arm industry undermining the knowledge and needs of all those residing in Illinois. By trying to stop this ban, the arm industry is once again putting profits over safety, Brady Chief Legal Officer Douglas Letter. At the moment, attack rifles are prohibited in 10 states and Washington, D.C., and many municipalities have passed laws outlawing these military weapons. NAGR's lawsuit might have disastrous effects on these towns as well as the entire nation if it's successful. The decisions made by judges in our justice system are influenced by the verdicts in previous instances. Illinois and Naperville must prevail in their legal battles in order to stop the arm lobby from reversing life-saving arm regulations across the nation. The 7th Circuit's ruling is limited to Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. However, NAGR versus Naperville, or a case substantially similar to it, may be appealed all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Attack weapon bans are essential for preventing violent attacks in the places where they're implemented, as well as in neighboring communities. The efforts of state and towns around the nation to keep their communities safe would be undermined if the Supreme Court ruled that Naperville's attack weapons prohibition is unconstitutional.
To propose regulations to ban all devices that turn legal weapons into machine guns.
Effective leadership and all the evidence-based, right, reduction in gun violence policies.
Thousands of weapons that got stolen and then recirculated because there was no proof of them being sold anywhere.
Furthermore, increasing access to these weapons would undoubtedly result in more attacks on our schools, places of worship, movie theaters, malls, and other locations where we should feel safe, since attack weapons are the preferred weapons of mass slayers. To be clear, the sole intention behind the construction of attack weapons was to murder as many people as possible in the shortest amount of time. The relative dangerousness of attack weapons, according to the NAGR, is meaningless. We don't agree. These weapons, which have a military aesthetic, have the ability to liquefy organs, crush bones, and render victims, particularly children, unidentifiable. Simply put, they belong in the hands of civilians. A nationwide ban on attack weapons is supported by more than 60% of Americans, and support is rising. People from all areas of life in America are sick of living in constant dread after witnessing the widespread devastation these weapons bring. Controversial arm control. People understand that there are concerns about recent arm control measures proposed in New Mexico, particularly those initiated by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. It seems that after facing legal challenges to an initial attempt to suspend the right to concealed and open carry through a public health executive order, the governor's office is now introducing several arm control bills in 2024. These proposed bills include efforts to ban so-called attack weapons, implement a mandatory 14-day waiting period for arm purchases, hold arm manufacturers liable for criminal conduct of third parties through the piercing of the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, or PLCAA, and introduce red flag laws.
That men and women in this country have the right to defend their own lives.
None of those individuals or groups focused on the actual injuries or deaths of the public.
But, Madam Speaker, guns have been prevalent in the United States of America since before our founding.
Additionally, it appears that there's an attempt to adopt the Gas-Operated Semi-Auto Arms Exclusion Act, also known as the Ghost Safe Act, at the state level. The situation raises concerns among those who value Second Amendment rights, as these proposed measures can impact the ability of individuals to exercise the right to keep and bear arms. It's worth noting that discussions around arm control often involve passionate viewpoints from various perspectives, and the introduction of such bills may lead to further debates and legal challenges in the state. The outcome will likely depend on the opinions of lawmakers, the legal system, and public sentiment. State-level Ghost Safe Act. New Mexico Senator Andrea Romero announced her intention to introduce state legislation mirroring the federal Ghost Safe Act. The federal bill, which aimed to ban rifles and mags nationwide, is now sought to be adopted at the state level. It appears that the language of the state bill will closely resemble that of the federal version. The Ghost Safe Act prohibits the import, sale, manufacture, transfer, receipt, or possession of certain arms, devices, or combinations of parts affecting interstate or foreign commerce. The bill specifically targets gas-operated rifles or gas-operated semi-rifles. The proposed state bill will compile a list of prohibited gas-operated semi-auto arms, including any modified to operate like traditional rifles.
An escalation in violence perpetrated with guns, particularly among our young people, in a manner that I have never seen.
Defund the police, and then they want to take our Second Amendment right to defend ourselves.
That you said that all assault weapons should be banned. Is that a fair statement?
Moreover, the legislation seeks to regulate combinations of parts that could enable a non-prohibited rifle to function as a prohibited one. This implies potential restrictions on the sale and possession of specific arm parts, raising questions about the future viability of items like AR-15 uppers within the state. While proponents of the bill argue that it will only prospectively ban certain rifles, they include a grandfather provision allowing individuals to keep arms already in their possession. However, such provisions often come with restriction requirements as seen in other jurisdictions. It's crucial to note that the impact of the Go Safe Act isn't limited to rifles. It extends to the possession of mags as well. The proposed state-level legislation introduces significant changes to arms regulations, potentially influencing the landscape of arm ownership in New Mexico. As with any contentious legislation, debate, legal challenges, and public discourse are likely to ensue. Impact of proposed arm control. Following the approval of the subsection, it will be unlawful to own, buy, import, or transfer mags that are capable of storing more than 10 rounds as stated in the bill that's now being submitted. In the event that the bill is passed into law, this constitutes a traditional mag ban, which implies that any future sales or purchases of mags that exceed the 10-round limit will be immediately terminated. The sale or transfer of mags that are currently in circulation would be outlawed, and the acquisition of new mags would be limited to individuals who already possess them. Existing mags would continue to be legal.
Running for President of the United States wanted to strip away our enumerated constitutional rights.
I'm not safe. And what are you going to do about it? I'm terrified in my own neighborhood.
Weapons and high-capacity magazines in 3 communities in 3 different states in our nation. Enough!
One difficulty that emerges is how the police would go about determining which mags or arms were in possession prior to the declaration of the ban. Frequently, the identification of pre-banned arms and mags is accomplished through the utilization of registration procedures and serialization criteria as described in the federal Go Safe Act regulations. In addition to the Go Safe Act and the mag ban, the proposed arm control measures in New Mexico go beyond these 2 provisions. There's a movement to adopt an obligatory waiting time of 14 days for the purchase of arms, which would be comparable to the waiting period that is 10 days in California. In addition, there are ongoing efforts to raise the minimum age requirement for purchasing arms, to create a red flag statute that applies over the entire state, and to propose wording that would pierce the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, PLCAA, which would make it possible for anyone to file lawsuits against arm manufacturers for crimes that were committed with their weapons. It appears that New Mexico will most likely incorporate language from a federal arm control law, maybe the Gun Crime Prevention and Community Safety Act, which was introduced at the national level in the previous year. In addition to other measures, this bill includes provisions for an obligatory waiting period, a red flag law, age limitations, purchasing permits, and other measures. Concerns have been raised over the scope of arm control measures that may be enacted in the state as a result of the possibility of this phrase being adopted.
Seizure of weapons from the homes of law-abiding American citizens.
We have the 3rd highest gun-related injuries in the country, 90% higher.
Gun violence in this country is an epidemic, and it's an international embarrassment.
As conversations continue and bills are presented, it's still unclear whether the final law will be restricted to the items that have been considered or whether it will include additional measures beyond those that have been discussed. In light of the circumstances, concerns have been raised over the overall impact on the rights guaranteed by the Second Amendment in New Mexico, which has the potential to become one of the states with the most stringent provisions for arm control. Urgent concerns. Adding to the concerns surrounding proposed arm control measures in New Mexico is the expedited introduction of these bills during the 30-day legislative season. Traditionally limited to budget negotiations and initiatives chosen by the governor, this accelerated process is now being utilized to fast-track what many consider to be controversial arm control legislation. The governor's decision to push for these measures during a session with a specific focus raises questions about the potential impact on the Second Amendment. The proposed bills aim to establish a statewide ban on certain rifles and mags, alongside various waiting periods, age restrictions, and red flag laws. Of particular concern is the potential imposition of mag bans, with the full extent of the legislation not yet fully known. Residents of New Mexico are urged to reach out to their local representatives promptly to voice their opposition to these proposed bills and initiatives. The governor's attempt to implement arm control measures during this abbreviated legislative session underscores the urgency for citizen engagement. If you reside in New Mexico, your involvement can make a significant difference in influencing the direction of these proposed armed control measures.
This rule turns law-abiding gun owners into felons is a result of unelected bureaucrats.
And I will keep doing everything that's based in science and fact and public safety effort.
Criminals will always find guns.
Absolutely.
And it is the cities with the most restrictive gun policies in the country where
For those outside of New Mexico, sharing this information is crucial for raising awareness about the situation. History has shown that such legislative developments often have wider implications beyond state borders. It's imperative for individuals across the country to stay informed and advocate for the protection of Second Amendment rights regardless of their location. And that's going to do it for this video. See you next time, and bye for now.